Look at this photo, I know it looks incredible, and no, it's not fake. It captures one of the most memorable events in aviation history, the Tower Bridge incident. The day a pilot hijacked a Hawker Hunter, flew over Big Ben, and went through Tower Bridge, one of the most incredible and most watched stunts ever. All to protest against the bad policies his government was implementing. But why was what he did so important? Why exactly was he protesting, and what happened afterward? In this video, we'll talk about this incident, so let's start with the background. The late 1950s and early 1960s were tough times for the Royal Air Force. In 1956, they had suffered a tough political defeat in Egypt while trying to regain control of the Suez Canal at the hands of General Nasser. In this conflict, the British came face to face with reality. It was clear that they could no longer finance a massive global army as if they were a great military power. Their economic and political power was no longer the same as before World War II, so major changes had to be made. In 1957, Defense Minister Duncan Sandys published a document detailing the drastic changes that had taken place. There were many changes and cutbacks, but the Air Force was the most affected. Sandys strongly believed that surface-to-air missiles would relegate the use of interceptor aircraft. Therefore, the costly operation, manufacturing, and development of aircraft was unnecessary and had to be reduced as much as possible to focus on the creation of radars and missiles. Companies like Buck or Hawker Siddeley had to abruptly cancel huge aircraft projects and greatly reduce their production. With fewer aircraft, there also had to be fewer pilots, and many of them were transferred or simply laid off. In fact, there was a major reduction of military personnel across all British armed forces during those times, from 690,000 personnel in 1957 to 375,000 in 1962. The morale of the Royal Air Force was very low because everyone thought they were literally going to stop flying planes. We're talking about one of the largest air forces in history, which fought in both world wars and was one of the most prestigious institutions in the world, being gradually dismantled. The cuts were at every level, but at least the traditions were respected. All the parades and commemorative shows were held without fail, and even though morale was low, the pilots honored the memory of those aviators who protected them from Germany twice. But all that would change in 1968. That year marked the 50th anniversary of the Royal Air Force. Everyone was excited because an unprecedented air show was expected in the British nation. However, due to a major budget cut, at that very moment, it wasn't even possible to hold a conventional event in the capital. The RAF pilots were furious. They were angry with Prime Minister Harold Wilson and the entire political leadership. Those same pilots had seen with their own eyes as children how the pilots of the past defended their country, and now, because of so many cuts, they couldn't even commemorate their heroic actions. However, despite their anger, no one wanted to protest because they were lucky to have a job. But there was one pilot who wouldn't just stand by and do nothing. Ironically, just days after the 50th anniversary, a training mission was scheduled as if it were any other day. 4 Hawker Hunter FGA-9s would take off from Tagmar Base in Sussex. They would fly along the coast until reaching West Ryam. This formation would be led by our protagonist, Lieutenant Alan Pollock. The takeoff and the beginning of the mission went as expected. When they reached Hartsfield, Pollock began his plan. Pollock began to return to base. He realized that taking off was not an option, that the takeoff at that moment was not working well, and he ended up without finding a companion. Afterwards, Pollock shut down. Then, he gradually peeled away from his companions, and when he had the chance, he broke off completely without them seeing where he went. He had a map of southern England tucked into his pants. He took it out and headed straight for the capital. He tuned into the control base frequency, afterwards to the commercial airplane base. The commercial airplanes. His companions, noticing he was missing and having heard his complaints, thought he had a minor problem and that he had landed at one of the bases, so they continued north. Without worrying, Pollock followed the railroad tracks, flying 30 meters above the ground at 650 kilometers per hour. It was quite a visual spectacle. Those tracks led him to the Thames. Everything was improvised and he hadn't planned a specific route, so it was perfect. There were no buildings on the river and it was a direct path to his target. Pollock followed the river to the Houses of Parliament, made 3 passes by Big Ben, making sure the Prime Minister saw him closely. He turned on the afterburner so he could be heard throughout the city center, especially when he passed by the Ministry of Defense building. After causing a sensation among Londoners and angering the political leadership, he continued his journey along the river. He flew over the RAF memorial to the fallen at a very low altitude, tipping his wings to pay his respects. But then, right in front of him, he came face to face with Tower Bridge, one of the greatest British symbols. At first he hesitated about going through it. He had 10 seconds to decide. The Hawker Hunter had a wingspan of 10.5 meters, while the bridge was 30 meters high and 40 meters between the towers. He was going at 650 kilometers per hour, almost at ground level. It was complete madness, and yet he did it. Likewise, one of the most incredible photos in the history of aviation was taken. After crossing the bridge, he pulled up with all his strength to avoid crashing into the ships and cranes that were ahead, and he managed to get out unscathed. Many things could have gone wrong that day, however. Everything was simply incredible. Afterwards, he wanted to show off by flying over his colleagues' bases. His blood was full of adrenaline, so he flew north, doing barrel rolls over 3. The air battle moved the pilots and the politicians. When he saw he was low on fuel, he flew to the base he was supposed to reach, West Raham. As soon as he got out of the plane, the military police were waiting for him. He went straight to jail, but the damage had already been done. Pollock had become a symbol both for pilots and for the average citizen, so condemning Pollock for his protest was uncomfortable for the RAF. From jail, Pollock received hundreds of thousands of signatures from workers supporting him. It is said that he received a 100-meter roll of telegrams with messages of support. The most important unions in the country supported him. He was quite a celebrity among those who had been holding back their discontent from the great economic crisis for years. All this made it difficult to convict Pollock, since an unfavorable sentence for him and the government could spark a major uprising in the midst of the crisis. So they simply gave him an honorable discharge quietly, arguing that he was suffering from severe stress. He kept his rank and his honor, but he could no longer fly for the RAF. After the controversy, Pollock would end up living as just another civilian. He was offered jobs to fly commercial planes, but he found it boring to fly in a straight line for hours, so he ended up going into business, becoming an excellent marketing consultant. It was apparently one of his hidden passions. In the following years, and when the pressure eased, the government admitted its mistake and removed his supposed condition from his record, making him, in the eyes of the administration and also of society, an honorable and impeccable pilot. Every year he was an honored guest at the Royal Air Force's commemoration ceremonies until his passing on July 1, 2025 at the age of 89. Today, he is remembered not as a daredevil, but as a man who did not stand idly by when he saw his government tarnish the name of one of the most historic air organizations, the RAF. If you like this video, you might be interested in learning about the USS Iowa turret disaster. Thank you for watching this video, and goodbye.